You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.
All right, Jimmy, Ott Paul Stone every week talking college basketball handicapping approaches. So different strategies that we picked up, certainly some things that may help shape your handicapping, and also giving you maybe a few examples that just happened or some games that qualify in the upcoming. And, well, Paul, I mean, rarely does when you make an example, and listen, some people do this, almost like a hedging. Kind of some people like to buy that half a point in the lower games in college basketball. Some don't. I'm a big proponent. If it's, and I got to clarify better. Spreads 1.5 to 6.5, 1.5 to 6.5. Laying points, taking points. You buy the half a point. BetRivers, again, is one of the few, if any, that applies to all games. They have the sliding scale. I wish Max could show a graphic of it, but they got the little scale. You can buy the half a point. It charges you an extra 10%. Some books offer it sometimes. Some books don't offer it to buy it on the half point, on the whole point, and some charge you 15 cents juice instead of 10 cents juice. Again, the math is exactly this. 1 out of 22 times it has to fall on that number for it to pay for itself. Well, lo and behold, Saturday, 6 of them. Boston College, Notre Dame, Kansas, Iowa State, North Carolina, Florida State, Kansas, Kentucky, Arkansas, Miami, Pitt, Oklahoma State, West Virginia. Monday night, Houston, Texas. Tuesday night, Boston College, Syracuse. This is roughly 40 games in this time period since we talked last, where it's fallen half. And, well, that's a lot. That is a lot. So, again, I mean, it's a flurry. It does not happen this often. Don't kid yourself. But late in the season, the lower lines, which fall closer to the number, as we have a large enough sample size where the numbers are pretty doggone tight. So, any of those, did you have the good side or the bad side? Iowa State missing the front end of a 1-1, and Kentucky missing the front end of a 1-1. Not very good free throw shooters, even just their best free throw shooters. Shepard for Kentucky, and then some threes at the buzzer, including one that drove Calipari crazy, the and one with 1 second to go to let that number fall on 6, Paul. But this is college basketball. That's, every little edge certainly counts.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, now that we have every team's played essentially 20 games, some maybe 21, 22 games, we have a larger sample size. The power ratings are really fine-tuned, so these games are more apt to fall really close to the point spread. And like you said, you don't need to do it often. You don't need to hit it often to justify buying that half point at BetRivers. So to have a weekend like occurred last weekend, if you bought the half point in all those instances, you pretty much paid for itself, and you're playing with house money, if you will, down the stretch. So college basketball, I tell you, it is a grind. It is interesting to go 5 months and to go so many games, day in and day out. You're just going to have so many different types of beats, so many games that fall close to the number. And you really got to have a strong stomach to endure the marathon, because there's going to be a lot of ups and downs.
But, we're both football guys first. But, as you get to these games late in the playoffs and certainly in the Super Bowl, it's kind of a coin flip. With a wider menu, you can be more selective and pick spots. And, another thing that has kind of paid off this week is something that we talk about in college football a lot is look-ahead spots, and St. John's got beat by Xavier, looking ahead to UConn in the Garden. You looked at North Carolina getting upset by Georgia Tech, looking ahead to Duke. You had there was another one in there that was a look-ahead spot. Not as much played in college basketball as college football, but it still does apply. Right now, we got a great thing going on for the big game. That's right. BetRivers is offering a second chance bet on your first same-game parlay on the big game coming up. Place a qualifying same-game parlay on the big game. If your bet loses, you get a bonus bet equal to your wager. With your same-game parlay bet, you also earn a square that could be worth as much as $10,000. 10 large, baby. See the BetRivers app for full details and bet on the big game at BetRivers a week from Sunday. All right, Paul, you talked about it as we're getting to in the 20s of games, and we're starting to see some of the some of the return trips. We're just getting into it right now. So this is perfect timing for this angle that you want to bring up. And we're talking about the return trips of these home-and-home conference series. And you're looking at the home team in a spot here. Explain what your angle that you're looking at on the back end of these home-and-home conference games.
Well, we're talking about college basketball obviously being a long season. So these teams now, again, about the 20-game point of a 35-game or so schedule over 5 months. So, as I heard a handicapper once say, and imitation is certainly the greatest form of flattery, handicapper once said, ups and downs, highs and lows is how it goes. And certainly in college basketball, when you're playing 35 games, there's going to be some peaks and valleys for sure. And as handicappers, our job is to try to determine where those peaks and valleys are going to occur, when they have the greatest probability of occurrence. So a situational handicapping technique that I like to selectively employ is playing teams which lost the first meeting outright as an away underdog, and now they're meeting that conference team in the rematch, and they are again receiving points as a home underdog. So looking at Saturday's schedule, I see at least 3 potential matchups which fit that criteria. Those games being, first of all, 16th ranked Auburn traveling to Ole Miss to play the Rebels, WAC leader Grand Canyon going to Utah Valley, and then Kansas State going to Stillwater to face the last place team in the Big 12, Oklahoma State. That Big 12 game, looking at it, I do project Kansas State to be a 1-point favorite at Oklahoma State, although there's certainly a chance that game could be picked or even that Oklahoma State could be the small favorite. I would take Oklahoma State there as the betting underdog if they were the betting underdog or that game was lined at pick. So if you want me to go on and talk about the games, I can, or if you want to interject.
Yeah. Continue, Paul. I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt you. Yeah.
Okay, certainly. Looking at the Oklahoma State game against Kansas State, hosting them this Saturday in that rematch, I have that game again currently Kansas State favored by 1. It's a Kansas State, it's an Oklahoma State team, first of all, that doesn't have many opportunities at any more victories in conference play. They're 1-7 in Big 12. They are the last place team in the Big 12, but they've played well at home. In their last game against West Virginia, they won that game 70-66, their last home game this past Saturday on January 27th. And then prior to that at home, Oklahoma State also led both Baylor and TCU in the final 10 minutes before losing to both by 5 points each. Lost to Baylor actually in overtime. So I expect Oklahoma State to fire its best shot this Saturday. I'm looking to take the Cowboys again at pick or better over Kansas State. The game in the WAC is going to be, again, Grand Canyon, the conference front runner at this point, traveling to Orem, Utah to play Utah Valley. In their first meeting, it wasn't even a contest. Grand Canyon led that game by 20 at half. They coasted to a 13-point victory. Utah Valley never really threatened in the second half. In that game, I think it's important to note, I always study the box scores, the night of or the next morning pretty thoroughly. And in that game, the Antelopes, Grand Canyon, really got some outstanding production from their bench. Those guys combined for a total of 36 points. They were 12 of 19 from the field. They were 7 of 11 off the bench from three-point territory. Three-point shooting, some teams are better three-point shooting teams than others, but there is some randomness, I think. I don't think Grand Canyon is going to get that type of bench production on Saturday against Utah Valley. And plus this Utah Valley team, they're not a great team, first of all, but they have a significant home and road dichotomy this season. Utah Valley, the Wolverines, 1-9 on the road. So really, really bad on the road, but 7-1 in the friendly confines there at home. I project Grand Canyon as a 6-point road favorite. So I anticipate backing Utah Valley plus the points in that game. And then if you want me to move on to the Southeastern
Conference. I just want to, first of all, the Oklahoma State, Kansas State, I think we agree Big 12 is maybe the best conference in college basketball. Paul, these are clearly the worst teams in the Big 12, would you say? I mean, between Oklahoma State and Kansas State. And the Kansas State game at home against Oklahoma, where Oklahoma had lost 4 of 6, and they were never in it. I mean, never in it. You know, the toast of the town, one of the toasts of the tournament last year was the little point guard and Jerome Tang for Kansas State in that classic final in the Garden against Florida Atlantic. But man, they've bounced certainly this year. So it's not a championship hangover, but it's success hangover happening in Manhattan, Kansas this year. But I wanted to, the Ole Miss game. Ole Miss has not lost at home, at the Pavilion. And I just want to ask you this: I think that was the best Ole Miss Mississippi State, highest level Ole Miss Mississippi State game I've ever seen. The league is better, period. You got 5 teams at the top, you got 5 teams at the bottom, and Ole Miss and Mississippi State are in the middle, along with Texas A&M in Florida. Is that a little bit of an emotional hangover? They hate each other there. I mean, they really do. And it was a high-level game. But then again, they have not lost. And you know what? That place is popping right now. Chris Beard made his point to go around to the stands and acknowledge the fans for coming out, because that's a different level environment right now. And we've seen that happen with Oates at Alabama, Pearl at Auburn. We've seen these really mediocre at best atmospheres really light up, and the Pavilion's popping right now in Oxford.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say Ole Miss, and I can't fault him, but Chris Beard came in, first-year head coach there for the Rebels. Although they were undefeated, I believe, in non-conference play, they played a really easy non-conference schedule.
Yeah.
They really didn't have any wins of significance before beating Mississippi State, their chief rival there at home. But they needed a victory like that. They needed, something to hang their hat on. And I always have concern when a team's coming off of a big victory and emotional effort, especially if it's against their rival. But what I look at in this game, first of all, is this Auburn team. They're currently ranked 16th in both wire service polls. But you and I, regularly on the podcast, we talk about the net rankings. We bring up Ken Palm. And looking at net today, this morning, Auburn 8th. Looking at Ken Palm, Auburn is 5th in the Ken Palm rankings. And I love the product that Bruce Pearl is putting on the floor there at Auburn.
They're not the 5th best team in the country. They ain't no way.
But the Tigers are not in the top 10.
No.
They're not in the top 10 based on power ratings or any other metric in my mind. And their power rating, and you may or may not agree, but their power rating has been built primarily on bludgeoning, outclassed teams into submission. Right. I look at their road performance, the 3 best teams that Auburn has faced on the road this season, I think have almost inarguably been Appalachian State, Alabama, and Mississippi State. The common denominator, they lost all 3. They also played Baylor in their season opener on a neutral site there in South Dakota, lost to the Bears by 6. So they have built their resume by beating outclassed teams by large margins, and haven't really performed very well against their marquee opponents, especially away from home. Mississippi, they may or may not qualify, quote unquote, as a marquee opponent, but I think the Rebels going to be getting about 5 points here. So I like Mississippi plus 5 to cover against Auburn on Saturday.
So, with my eyes, it tells me just history and watching so many of these games, because I definitely pay a little attention, because I like, and we talked about this last year, I like taking the home teams in the Ole Miss-Mississippi State rivalry and the Alabama-Auburn rivalry, because a lot of times they really didn't care about those basketball games, but when those rivals come to town, they have a lot of extra juice in it. 50-40-70. So what is that? 50-40-70 was at that game? The box score tells you how high level that game was as well. Both teams shot at least 50% from the field, at least 40% from 3, and at least 70% from the line. Chris Beard, what does he specialize in? Running up and down or defense, Paul? I mean, and same thing with the state coach as well, and that's why it was so unusual. But we'll have to see. And I think Auburn, and I thought Auburn might bounce back against State. I made a small play on them against State in Starkville, and they did not deserve to be as close as they were even. I was way more impressed in Auburn playing close, very competitive against Alabama than I was in that loss against Mississippi State. Was there that hangover effect? It looked that way for, well, I guess you could say a while with Alabama. So just interested because there is a little extra juice. But yeah, Ole Miss is on the bubble, and before these two games, Ole Miss had to win these two games to hold serve at home because what was their best win before Mississippi State? Memphis. That win doesn't look that good right now as they are sliding big time. So Utah Valley against Grand Canyon, Ole Miss against Auburn, Oklahoma State against Kansas State. If they are like laying a point or two, Paul, would you say no, bets off? Or did these different games are case by case?
I would, looking specifically, first of all, at that Oklahoma State hosting Kansas State game, I would take, I think Oklahoma State's a good probability to win the game. So I would take Oklahoma State up to -1, or obviously at pick or as an underdog. And then, I'd like to get Grand Canyon in the Utah Valley game. I would like to get Utah Valley plus, I think the 6 or more is needed there, so I would like 6 there.
Okay.
And then Ole Miss plus 5 or more over Auburn.
Okay. So six, at least 6 or more, 5 or more, and then Oklahoma State right around the pick. All right, with Paul Stone, each and every week we do this. College basketball approaches all the way through March Madness. I'm Jimmy Ott here in the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.